people that are in the union have some protection. Yeah.
Unless, you know, it doesn't make sense to make you download the app. Do you have a lot of?
I had the app. It wasn't working on the app either.
See, waiting room at Met.
You had a picture I held over there too, with your bronze body and the on the beach every day.
I work outside in the yard. And I can do sunscreen, but those.
Sit down.
Yeah, I try.
Hi, Eloise.
Hi,
Sorry we're late.
that's quite all right. They just have a little whirling Zoom icon that lets you hang out, so I was doing other things.
Okay, we turn it up as loud as it goes.
Yeah, we're gonna have to turn the fans off.
Okay.
And like I say, this is next to this, so this is great. Did you hit record on your phone?
Not yet.
Okay.
Ready when to start?
Give me 1 more minute.
Okay.
Are you ready? Is everybody ready?
There's water in the fridge if you guys want it.
Thank you. And again, I apologize for the late start. We had a little trouble getting Zoom started. But we're all here and ready to roll.
Ready to roll.
Okay.
Okay.
Good afternoon. This is Eileen Monreale, a board member for Friends of Olmsted Beil House. I want to thank Carlotta DeFillo and Felicity Beil and Eloise Beil, who's joining us via Zoom. These is a wonderful opportunity. We have the 3 daughters of Carlton and Louise Beil present to provide some really interesting background questions that we all have a deep interest in. Today is June 29th, 2020, and we are here at 4485 Highland Boulevard, also known as the Casman House. Thank you very much, Tina, for hosting us today. We are going to ask you to share some memories, and our format will be that I'll begin, and we have some other board members present, so Tina Casman-Dunn will follow my questions. Paula Tramontano will follow and ask questions after that, just to keep it very shared and conversational, which we look forward to just all 3 sisters sharing as if we're having a conversation in somebody's living room, which we are. And then finally, Pat Salmon will follow with her final questions, but feel free to add in anything that we might be overlooking that you think would be interesting. So to start with the questioning, I would like to ask about an award that Carlton received in 1995 from the Environmental Protection Agency for 69 years of service to the environment. Could anybody talk to me about that?
I hope Eloise can read the fine print, because I have a document, thank you, Eloise, that doesn't let me see, the copy doesn't let me see who gave the award out exactly.
The EPA.
Yeah, but which one?
Region 2.
Which
is, I don't know. I found it. I went to work. I took vacation time. I went to work. I found a clipping. It says the Environmental Protection Agency Region 2, which is New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. So I can only imagine if we'd ever gotten to Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands, it would never have come home, all those new plans. But that's who gave the award. And it always had a beautiful picture of him getting the award, which I didn't have. So put them together.
I think we did share that too.
I
I'm
don't
not
know,
sure where
Jan-
it wound up. Eloise, do you have any additional memories of that?
Well, I remember that he was delighted, and they had a reception over in Rossville at the Greek Revival, that beautiful Greek Revival building that was converted from residential into a reception hall. I'm confusing it with the pavilion on the terrace, which is of course in New Brighton. But there was a a comparable Greek revival on Arthur Hill Road in Rossville.
Burke's place.
Say-
The restaurant.
Yeah.
Burke's
Yeah.
Landing. Burke's.
Was it Burke's Landing or was it the other one? Do
I
we,
think
do
it
we,
was
does
restaurant.
it matter?
I think it was Burke's Landing.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I think.
Do you remember if your dad was extremely honored with that?
Oh, yes, of course.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was over the
Yeah.
moon. He just couldn't be more tickled that it was who it was coming from and what it was about. He went to the reception that they had there, and yeah, he had the photograph and had the plaque, and I think we probably left it right on the mantelpiece at 4515. That's what I'm sure that's where it lived.
That's what Mark remembered,
Yeah.
unless we put it in the study.
Mhm.
Put off the last.
I don't think so, because we had the file cabinet right there with a lot of his papers too.
Hmm.
Super. Well, certainly that would be something to be enormously proud of, like a Lifetime Achievement Award. So we're going to zigzag around, so these questions may seem a little out of order, but going back to 1930 census, Carlton gave his occupation as a carpenter. Did he work as a carpenter?
No, at that
No.
time, we checked did the math on our fingers. He was a curator. If you were a census taker and somebody said curator to
Right.
you,
You heard carpenter.
You might have heard a more familiar word. Yeah. I mean, some of his responsibilities at the museum did include constructing exhibits, but
he wouldn't
not a
have said.
carpenter. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's cleared up, and that's interesting because we do know census tends to have a lot of misinformation. So
It
your
can.
mom, pardon?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So your mom, Louise
Yeah.
Abbott?
Yes.
Beil, was a tribe of Native Americans. Did she ever mention what?
She was not a member of the tribe, but she was of Abenaki descent. So
Did she ever talk about any of that, or?
it was sort of family legend.
I can tell you that the way the information passed down to our generation, for me, is kind of unforgettable. My dad did a lot of programming, and he had a ceremony of 4 lights, and he would do his famous fire lighting with rubbing, with not rubbing 2 sticks, but with a bow drill. And so he would do that to make a central light. And he did this at the Unitarian Church, in the church school, in the children's program, to start the worship service in a special way. And so there was, among one of the services, he was talking about Native American traditions, and he asked the students, the children who were gathered around, anybody who has American Indian blood, please raise your hand. And we were sitting there feeling kind of glum. And afterwards, my mother came up to us and said, "Why didn't you raise your hands?" And we didn't know that she had Abenaki blood, that she was of American Indian descent. We just thought my dad was the tradition bearer because he had all the information that he had gathered and learned from his largely Haudenosaunee colleagues in the Woodcraft League. And some of them became very good family friends. We certainly remember having Tom Two Arrows come when he was going to do a museum program on Staten Island. He would come afterward for dinner with his wife and his daughter, Okanta. And I can remember him dancing, doing a dance demonstration for us in the kitchen. And against all odds, about 10 years ago, here in Vermont, I met the grandson of Tom Two Arrows, and we
No.
found out the connection that we had.
Wow, what a coincidence.
What are the odds? He had grown up in California, had come to Vermont to qualify to go to UVM in an environmental studies program. So while he was earning his residency, he was staying with colleagues of mine who work at the Maritime Museum, and that's how I got to know him.
Well, it is a small world. That is quite a coincidence.
Yeah.
Did your mom ever share anything further about any of her life experiences? Did she ever know her Native American relatives or?
That was, oh, well, to the degree that she did, she said that she herself had learned rather late in life when a cousin came to visit, and she found out from the cousin. And that was maybe while she was in high school or college.
Interesting. Interesting how little our parents tell us. Or
Yeah.
like at some point they find out late.
Well, and the other thing is, she was at UVM, University of Vermont in Burlington, class of 1936. And during the 1930s, Vermont was in the process of what is known as the Eugenics Project, which was building better Vermonters by winnowing the gene pool and sterilizing undesirable people who did not fit normal societal models. And a lot of the Abenaki people that I know now have devastating family memories of that era. And so I'm guessing that the relatives who might have talked with her about this were keeping very quiet. The generation that was her parental and grandparent generation probably would not have said anything because it was considered unsafe.
That's an interesting history I did not know, and I'm sure it would make her
Yeah.
not widely.
Yeah, but of course, once she had mentioned to us that we had this descent, it was something that we talked about quite a bit in the family. My dad would say, isn't it interesting that, because she acknowledged all her ancestry, she loved genealogical research. You asked about her hobbies and interests, and genealogy was right up there on the list. Whenever we would travel to Vermont to visit the relatives on her side of the family, we would stop in at every little local historical society and library so that she could look in books to see if there were any mentions of her ancestors that she knew of. And she helped me trace for an anthropology class that I was taking when I was in college. She and I went to several genealogical libraries in Manhattan and traced the family back, her ancestors back.
They sound like fun and eventful trips, but I think everything the Beil family did was eventful and sometimes fun.
Yeah, well, yes. And so where I was going with that when I detoured hundreds of miles and hundreds of years was that my dad would tease Mama about some of her ancestors were coming over in a boat and others of them were on the shoreline saying, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah. So Carlton had a sense of humor.
Oh, Lord, yes. Yes, you asked about whether either of them had favorite expressions, and the two that immediately came to my mind with my dad, when he was living with me at the end of his life, he had home health aides who would come in every morning to help him bathe and dress. And then he would go off to his day at Project Independence, which he enjoyed tremendously. And every day, whoever arrived would say, "Good morning, Mr. Beil. How are you today?" And he would look up at them with a gleam in his eye and he'd say, "Ain't dead yet." And if they were new and had not met him before, it would catch them off guard and he would laugh. He thought that was the funniest thing. Yeah, but years before, back on Staten Island, if you asked him, "How are you, Carlton? How are you doing?" He'd say, "Can't kick, gotta keep both feet on the ground."
Sounds like quite a character too. Your parents bought the Cruiser Finley house that now stands at historic Richmond Town to preserve it. Can you all tell us about that?
Well, I know that they were happy to preserve it, but they really bought it to live in. It was huge.
Was it prior to owning the house? Ah, so tell us, like, how did this evolve? So that was their first home as a married couple?
It was in the wrong place. It was, you weren't allowed to live in it. It had to be moved. There was a highway coming, and so in order to live in the house, they would have had to move it. So they would have had to find an affordable plot of land and move the building. And that's where the wheels came off the wagon.
And what year did they buy the house? Roughly.
Early 1950s.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you said somebody in their notes had 1951 for when they moved into the big house. And no, they moved into the big house in 1955. So I'm guessing the process of working to try to acquire and try to relocate the Finley house would have been probably started around 1951. And it went on for a couple of years. And then they ultimately, the house went to Richmond Town, and the lot of land onto which they were going to move it was sold to provide the down payment on the Olmsted house.
Oh, which you refer to as the big house.
Yes.
Is that good for that question?
Yeah.
So,
Actually, in the family, we always just referred to it as the house. There was no other, you know, in our.
so all children were born in the Olmsted Beil house. No, they didn't have children when they were living at Cruiser Finley house.
They didn't ever get to live in the Cruiser Finley house. There were other rentals and things like that.
It was kind of dilapidated. Daddy would take us there every so often. You remember? He would take
Yes.
us there, and we
Yeah.
would climb through and
Through a
walk.
boarded up window or door or something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was fun to explore. We liked that. But I find it very hard to imagine Carlton confined to a space that small.
And storage needs.
Storage needs. Yeah.
So again, we're jumping around here, but now we're jumping forward to today. Is Carly still working for a museum or a historical
Yeah,
society?
she works at Historic Richmond Town, Staten Island Historical Society, with curator. She's in the curatorial department, and she absolutely loves it.
So the Beil family has a long history with historic Richmond Town.
Okay. And yeah, museums in general, and Richmond Town now, I guess, is pretty. Staten Island Museum too.
Yes. Yes. Daddy worked there from 1926 to 1944. I started there in 1977 and stayed till 1988. And Carlotta was there in the middle of the time that I was there.
1980, 81, I think.
Were you there for the 100th anniversary? The centennial was 1981.
I must have been, I guess. I was there because of the CETA program.
Yeah.
Which was so wonderful, and I got to work in the archives, and it was great. And then Carly has done programs there. She was in there, she might still be, except for the COVID. She might be working a little bit for them still too.
And I was one of their Sunday artists
There you go.
in the 90s.
And what are the Sunday artists?
They do programs that are hands-on arts activities that explain in the making of the art, you explain something about a scientific principle. So big fun.
Fantastic. So my last question should be fairly simple. When was Carlton born?
1908.
January 7th, 1908.
1908. Census screwed that up too.
Yeah, that was not correct in the census. So now I will move this questioning.
Hello, neighbors. This is Tina. Hi, Eloise.
Hi, I can't see you, but nice to hear you.
Yes, okay. So we know you bought the Finley house. That didn't work out. Where did you then really live before you bought here in Eltingville?
First place I remember hearing about was in Dongan Hills, but I don't know what street.
They were on Richmond Road, but I don't know what house. In Rosebank, wasn't it?
Rosebank.
Sense? I may be.
Do you remember the name Lavori?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe owned a house somewhere in Dongan Hills that we rented.
Dongan Hills, yeah.
Yeah. And then Livermore Avenue.
Yes,
Westerly?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know the street number. And then Taylor Street.
Yes.
And
And 4 digits on Amboy Road.
Oh, 5316 Amboy Road, that's right. Yeah, that was the earliest place. They were living there when Carlotta was born, sharing a house
that's right. That's my
with the
early
Levies.
memory.
Yeah, with Auntie Pete and Uncle Mike. Yeah.
Is that house still there?
No, that was demolished.
Okay. All right. When exactly did you then buy the Olmsted house?
We moved in 1955 because Felicity was a year old. And the family story about that was because there was the coal stove in the kitchen, which had been used, and the house had been vacant for many years. Felicity was still at the crawling stage, and so she was crawling around in the kitchen as we were exploring the house for the first time, and she looked at her hands, which were, of course, black with coal dust, and burst into tears.
Sissy.
Little sissy. I was scared. Nobody told me that was gonna happen.
Okay.
And I remember going down into the basement with my dad, and he looked at all the different ages and stages of brick, both in the kitchen chimney and down in part of the basement. And I can remember him taking out his penknife. This was such a characteristic thing to do, and scraping a little sample of the mortar between the oldest of the bricks, which were a soft rosy color, and showing us that there was horsehair and ground up oyster shells and clam shells making up the mortar together with local sand and probably clay of some kind. I'm not sure. Oh no, lime, of course, the lime from the shells. Yeah, so we got that little lecture right away, and then the adze marks on the beams, and that was explained to us. Never miss an opportunity to teach, you know.
Very good.
Every
Okay.
moment is a teachable moment.
Now the house, even today, has a lot of wallpaper.
yes.
And some of it looks old, some of it looks more modern. Did the Beil family put up any of the wallpaper?
We put up the stuff, I say, but it was Eloise and her team in the hallway on the second floor and in the bathroom.
And I have to say, it broke my heart to put anything over the old hallway wallpaper. It never got completely replaced because I couldn't bring myself to. I loved the old wallpaper there, even though the Cullens must have been the ones who were starting some renovations in the hallway. And so they had plastered areas that had holes where the plaster was damaged in any way. And when I was in probably 7th or 8th grade, because I was taking watercolor lessons with Lola Giraud down at the Staten Island Museum. So I had my watercolors and I painted in on top of the plaster patches to match the old wallpaper so that we wouldn't have to replace it.
I sort of remember that.
Well,
And the
Yeah.
wallpaper in our bedroom with the farmhouses
Oh,
on.
yes. Yeah,
The Cullens did that,
yes.
don't you think? Because it's way newer than the.
Oh, yes, yes, that was one of their renovations. Absolutely. It was brandy new, other than that the house had been vacant for 5 years, but it was new at that time. Yeah.
but the dining room wallpaper, the red,
Oh, that was there when we moved in.
I love
Oh,
that.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But I think again that might very well have been the Cullens and the Mariners Family Home for Aged Women of the Sea in Stapleton.
Yeah.
That had years and years ago, maybe still does, but I doubt it. But it used to have the same wallpaper inside in their parlor, I think it was.
It's been demolished.
Ah, okay, well, there you go.
I guess the wallpaper one with it.
There's some in a different colorway in a museum in Ohio. So it's
Did you
still
see
on
it?
the, yes,
Did you take a picture?
no. Did I have a cell phone with a camera on?
Not at that time.
so perhaps it does predate the Cullens and Eloise. What did you think then?
The
It
dining-
could, I wouldn't, yeah, I have a book on dating wallpaper from the Society for Preservation of New England Antiquities, but I never bothered to research it. But I'll tell you, that was another one where we bought wallpaper to replace it, and then I certainly wasn't going to be the one to take it down. I loved it. I loved it. And I love the living room wallpaper too.
Oh, yeah. I would
Oh, yeah.
have replaced that for anything.
Mm-mm.
Crisscross and then an oval inside with flower.
Yeah. Yeah. Just such lovely Victorian wallpaper.
Okay, next question. When you go in that kitchen, believe it or not, there's a dishwasher in there.
Thank you, grandmother.
Okay,
Yes.
nobody really had dishwashers back in the day. So where'd that come from?
Grandmother,
Bought it
mother's
for-
mother bought it.
wanted to make life easier for Mama. And sadly, our water pressure was so bad that you really had to pretty much wash the dishes before you put them in the dishwasher, because otherwise all it did was to sort of spread the little broccoli buds and all over everything. So, yeah.
And then bake them on.
Well, the dishwasher's still there.
Uh-huh.
So maybe we should put a plaque on it.
We used it for draining the dishes that we hand washed.
Yeah.
It worked very well for them.
For that,
Years.
yeah.
Okay, how about any major or large improvements that your family made?
Oh, alas.
Alas.
Au contraire.
How about a furnace? Because there's kind of two furnaces in the basement today.
Eloise made Daddy buy a new one at some point, right?
Gee.
There's one behemoth down there.
Yeah, the behemoth is
Oh,
lying
like a
on its
giant
side.
rock.
Yeah,
That's the old one.
And there
and
was,
oh, you know what? He bought a new motor. A new, sort of ignition system and motor that's, yeah. Which if nobody's been running a sump pump when it rains, I'm sure is completely a wreck, because the sump pump was submersible and always had to be plugged in and monitored because of the changes in drainage around the property from the change land use. And so as roads and homes were built in the adjoining property, the runoff pattern changed totally, and the water was pretty much diverted right into the house and into the basement and had to be pumped out again through the door at the south end. But luckily, because the house is built into a hill, there was a natural flow pattern. So it was maintainable. You could do it, but you had to have all the equipment in working order. If the power's been turned off, then there was no way to keep it going.
You remember when the houses in this area were all surrounded by drainage ditches?
Yeah, the ones in the back, the new
And there were,
ones.
yeah, and there were
On Orchard Lane.
Uh-huh. And the houses going towards Woods of Arden Road, some of them had.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's true.
I remember that because that was where I saw my first muskrat, in one of the drainage ditches. It was such a big,
Wow.
connected, healthy ecosystem that I saw a muskrat and had no idea. I was very young, had no idea what I was looking at.
You kitty, you kitty.
No, popped up out of the
Okay.
water, looked at me and said, "Ooh, scary." Back down.
Well, we had the brook here, and that was our drainage system, yeah.
Yeah,
And the brook connected with the properties in the back, yeah.
yes.
And they broke up the ponds, that all the goldfish were flying down to the beach.
Oh,
Okay, my last question. The barn. I love the barn. And I know
We all loved the barn.
Now, it burned in April. I happen to know that because I it was on my brother's birthday, April 11th. But what was the year? Do you girls remember?
I'm guessing 1955 or 6. I'm kind of guessing 1956. I always said my grandmother's house is a 1957 ranch. And the barn was gone by the time grandmother's house was built. They cited grandmother's house and the Talon's house.
1960.
Huh?
I think you might be right.
What's that?
Grandmother's, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Grandmother's house, what I thought was built in 1960. Do you remember somebody named Barbara Cornell by any chance from school?
Did you say Barbara or Robert? What was Barbara?
Barbara Cornell.
Not really.
Rats. Because I was playing at her house the day the barn caught on fire and I was coming home. I think I was across the boulevard, somewhere near La Toja,
Oh, okay, yeah.
and I saw the smoke. But if I could remember whether it was 7th or 8th grade,
Ah.
might help more with the date.
Yeah, because I couldn't pin down the date on it.
And did it totally burn to the ground? Was it put out and later demolished? Was it hauled away? Do you remember any of that all happening?
Let's hope Eloise has a better accurate memory, because all I remember is that the Talum's garden incorporated, which was right on the spot where the barn was, incorporated a lot of the fire damaged boards in their garden.
As
They-
walkways and the edges of beds.
A lot. They had no lawn whatsoever in their yard, so it was a big garden. And
It
they
was in-
always seemed to find another board when they needed one.
So their house was built then, or this was their property later on? We're finding remnants of the barn. Is that what you're saying?
No, their house was built after the barn burned.
Okay, but they were finding pieces of the barn.
Mhm.
Do you remember the cleanup?
I am sure that my impression, I shouldn't say I'm sure, but my impression is because the way the plots were laid out, grandmother and grandfather's house was on one side, and it would have been beside where the barn was, but not exactly on the footprint of the barn. And Talum's house was on the other side. Again, not directly on the footprint, but the sidewalk up to my grandmother's house would have been right on the boundary between the two pieces of property, and it went parallel to and practically identical to the drive to the barn, where the driveway to the barn would have been. And I'm pretty sure that the cement slab foundation of the barn was torn up and bulldozed out at the time that the Talum's house was being constructed. Does that make sense?
Yes, sounds familiar.
Yeah.
But the barn was on your property at the time.
No,
It was
No.
not.
no,
No.
we did not.
We
Oh,
didn't
you
own
didn't
that
own
land.
that. Okay.
No. See, when Dr. Circus bought the piece of property, he bought the 6-acre remnant of Olmsted's farm that had then belonged to Mr. Hale at that time. And he subdivided as part of the arrangement with how my parents were going to be able to acquire the property. We got a central plot that put a good piece of property around the house itself and gave us an easement on the driveway so that we would have access via Highland Boulevard. And the perimeter lots were cropped off to be sold. So there was my grandparents, Talum's, Termina's, and then the property that became Van Alphen's down at the foot of halfway down the driveway. And then the lot that the Casmans eventually bought, opposite Van Alphen's. Van Alphen's was staying in the middle of the strawberry patch, adding insult to injury, I'll tell you.
Right. We talk about that strawberry patch a lot.
Everybody, we all still remember the strawberry patch. Yeah.
Very good. All right. That's my round of questions. Who's
Tina,
next?
I have a question for you, which is
Yes?
going out towards Woods of Arden Road. Do you remember that we used to walk out there and there were a couple of giant stumps from the chestnut trees?
I was just talking, we added that question to the list.
Okay, there you
because
go.
I fondly remember those chestnut trees. There were so many of them, and we used to go and pick those chestnuts all the time. Now, so that piece of property was not yours.
No,
correct?
no, that had been previously sold.
Previously
That-
sold.
Yeah, and by the time Carlotta, Felicity, and I were in the neighborhood, at least one of the really big old chestnut trees had been cut, and there was a stump, and we used to use it as a table.
Okay. Well, there were a few that were still healthy because they were still delivering chestnuts, because we would go and grab them, and we played that game where you put them on a shoestring and
Yeah,
next time you
conkers.
hit it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you'd have a 1 killer and a 2 killer.
Yep.
Yes, that's okay. Oh shoot, there was something else. No, all right. That's what we were wondering, whether my thought was the way that Olmsted approached the house originally from the woods of Arden. Wouldn't it
Yes.
make sense that that would be his LA through those chestnut trees, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. That's what I thought.
Yes.
And then
Yes,
it's
that is
over
true.
towards the barn. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very good. That's a good mystery to solve there.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Paula.
I'm Paula Tremontano, a board member with the Friends of Homestead Beil House. And just to clarify a couple of things about your grandmother's piece of property. So was that a separate piece of property that she bought from someone else, or was that part of?
Dr. Circus,
Yes, the real estate agent that bought what Eloise was just saying,
Right.
that there was a big 6-acre parcel, and this real estate agent, Dr. Circus,
Sirkus, Louis, right, Circus.
but no elephants. He bought the big parcel and then divided it up.
Do you know how much your parents paid for the Olmsted house and that property?
8,000?
8,000.
I
Yeah,
thought so
but-
too.
Go
I
ahead.
found 16,000 in a newspaper clipping, but I thought Family Story is 8,000.
Well, it was 8,000, but then there were some payments that were made during the initial phase before the mortgage was totally secured from the bank, that were made directly to Dr. Circus. And then when it was mortgaged, there was interest added on. And so the ultimate amount that he ended up paying was probably to 16 if you added it all up.
Okay.
Okay, the house that's across from the Casman house, Kelly's house, did the Beils ever own that property?
No, that was one of the ones.
One of the divided.
That's the Van Alphen.
Van Alphen's.
He was a builder.
First little modest house there.
Okay, we're jumping definitely around. Where are the ashes of Carlton and Louise? Where will they be going?
We'll-
Louise Field is planted in Waterville, Vermont, where
next to her grandmother and grandfather, and across the little pathway from her grandmother's sister, and Aunt Margie and Uncle Victor are there, and like everybody on her side of the family, except her mother, who is buried on Staten Island at Moravian Cemetery.
And Carlton, his
We'll be
ashes?
going there. He's late, you know?
but I'm bummed.
Hey.
Can I just say his ashes are in my living room right now? And I have no problem with that. Makes me very happy.
When was your mother's birthday?
May 8th, 1916.
And her date of death? Do you have that handy?
August 16th, 1993.
Great.
Great. You mentioned that your mother was into genealogy.
Yes.
Were there other hobbies or interests that she had?
Gardening, nature walks, acrostics, embroidery, crewel embroidery.
Reading.
Oh, big.
Surely that goes without saying in the field family.
Actually, it's a lifestyle more than a hobby. You
Classical.
interrupt reading to do other things, pretty much. Writing.
Mhm.
Yeah. And she was a leader, a group leader for the Campfire Girls for a number of years. And she also was one of the leaders of the youth programs at the Unitarian Church of Staten Island for many years.
That kept her
It was
busy.
something that she and my dad did together.
Can you tell us anything about Carlton's years at the American Museum of Natural History, like what his duties were?
He was supervisor of circulating exhibits for most of the time that he was there. So I
But-
think, go ahead.
But how he got there was one of his wonderful stories, which was he had left the Staten Island Institute of Arts and Sciences and had gone up to Rochester, New York, to go to the university there. And he took a job to support himself at the Rochester Museum and Science Center, working with the director, Roddy Coles, Roddy Coles was on Staten Island. I'll think of his director at Rochester Museum and Science Center, Charles Parker, who was Iroquois and a scholar and somebody that my dad really admired. So he worked there for a couple of years, but when World War II ended, my dad couldn't go into the service because he had a rheumatic heart. He had had rheumatic fever twice in his youth, and it left him with heart damage. So Tilly Weingartner was the one who told me when Carlton was doing, well, when he was told that he physically was not able to enlist, which he had been planning to, he looked at her and he said, "Now how am I going to get to Bali?" Because he had wanted to be in the Air Force and become a pilot. He really wanted to fly. And so he couldn't. In fact, what Tilly told me was that at that time he was working for the Staten Island Museum, and he was leading a lot of nature walks and bird walks because he was one of the only young men who hadn't gone off to war. And his circulation was so bad that by the middle of the walk, his hands would be turning blue from poor circulation, and he would have to lie down on his back and put his hands and feet up in the air to restore the circulation. And then he'd get up and he'd keep on walking and finish the program. So during World War II, he went off to Rochester, and he was doing this job, which he really loved, and he was taking science courses, which he loved. And then the war ended and the veterans came home and had preference for the university places. And so as a non-veteran, he was no longer able to keep enrolled. And just about that time, one of his old Woodcraft League friends came for a visit, or no, gave him a phone call and said, "Carlton, if you want a job at the American Museum of Natural History, they've got an opening, but you've got to get down there tomorrow." And so Carlton threw his personal belongings into his car, which probably was the car known as Philomena Flap Fender. Gives you an idea of what kind of shape it was in. And he drove through the night, got down to New York, went into the American Museum of Natural History to the education office, because he used to do summer programs there anyway. And said, "I hear you need somebody in the education department." And the director said, "I can't talk to you right now. I'm too busy. We've got classes arriving and the docents didn't show up." "Well, I can do your tour." Said, "You're hired." And that was the start.
Do you have any memories of some of the exhibitions that he was involved with while he was at the American Museum of Natural History?
I'm not aware that he was involved in the exhibitions per se. He was in charge of the circulating exhibits. And I seem to remember going to his workspace once and saying, "Wow, that's a great little diorama." And he said, "Oh, thank thank you, I made that. I didn't know he ever did that. I know there was a team, and he didn't make all the little green boxes that went around to the schools in the 5 boroughs and occasionally New Jersey. But he made that one.
Was he involved in
Oh,
patients?
wait, Eloise has something to say.
Yeah,
More details?
a lot of the dioramas that were the core of that collection were WPA projects. And then he continued to augment. And part of what he did was to assess when people would bequeath collections of materials and mounted specimens and things like that they had collected on their travels around the world. He would go to the home or estate, as the case might be, and assess what was suitable for the museum and for, especially for education, youth education programs. He worked in the education department as a docent, lecturer, school program person for the first few years. And he also was one of the people who was asked when educational television was first starting to be a thing. And I'm sure Tina will remember, because when Carlton was going to be on television, the Beil family did not have a television and the Casmans did. And so they would probably invite us over so that we could watch Carlton on television. It was a big deal.
I remember once being in his office, and he was talking, teachers would call there all the time, but this call got routed through to him because the secretary couldn't manage it, because it was a teacher who wanted a new subject or a theme. And I believe he instigated a new circulating exhibit based on this teacher's wish for this theme.
Sounds right up his alley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be absolutely right. Yeah.
I think that was one of his favorite parts of the job, is talking with teachers and really working to meet teachers' needs like that.
Great. Was he involved in any publications at the museum? The American Museum of Natural History?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. He did not like typing. Typing was a real barrier for him. He could talk forever and eloquently and not miss a beat, but you put him in front of a typewriter and the stream pretty much dried up. People person.
Mhm.
Why did he retire?
Had to.
65.
You turn 65, they cut you off. Yep.
So his time in the Staten Island Institute of Arts and Sciences, why did he leave that position?
He had been there from his late teens through his 20s and 30s. And the new director who came in, when Roddy Coles came in, Roddy felt as though Carlton was kind of stagnating and needed more, and would never on his own go out and get the education that he clearly craved. And so Roddy really pretty much encouraged it, or even facilitated, like, here's your hat, what's your hurry? Why don't you go do something else? Work at a different place. You can't spend your whole life in this one place. And by that point, Uncle Billy Davis was dead, and Charles Lang was dead, and most of the people that Carlton had, oh, and Carol Stryker, who had been the curator, had moved on to the zoo. The nucleus of staff that Carlton had worked with for all those years had shifted. And so it was a great opportunity for him to actually enroll and take courses. He had taken a couple of night classes at Wagner College, a few, off and on as he was able before that. And he continued afterward, but so much of what he did was just autodidact, self-taught, reading everything.
So that's when he went to Rochester, yeah?
Yep, yep,
Worked out really well.
yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna hand the questioning over.
I don't know if he did any work that got into the proceedings at the Staten Island Museum.
I've
And-
seen his name in there,
Uh-huh.
giving education programs,
Oh,
or
programs.
lectures.
Uh-huh.
Talking,
Ah.
I can say writing.
Yep.
Yep, and bird counts, I'm sure he was active in the bird counts.
Yep. But we don't have him writing anything. Yeah, okay.
Not his thing.
I came across hi Eloise, this is Pat Salmon. How are you?
Hi, Pat.
Yeah, I haven't talked to you in 20 years.
Long
or so.
time no
Yes.
see. Yeah. Yeah.
I came across something that he wrote about birds and bird feeding. It was a pamphlet, a publication. I think it was the only thing I found, to be quite honest
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah, that wouldn't be surprising. I did a scope and content note for Carlton's little Carlton Beil collection in the Institute archives. So anything that I knew of at that time would be in that box, whether it was one or two, might have been just two gray boxes.
Good to know. We'll have to go back and look through those one of these days when the archives reopens.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
COVID is over.
Yeah, I knew this was not the ideal time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have more questions. We have more and more questions every time we turn around. But one of the things that's intrigued me about that house is the rock garden that's on the west side of the house. So I wanted to know, did your father and mother put it in? You know, where did their selections come from? Anything that you ladies might know about the rock garden?
I think they had more input into the rocks than into the plants. I think a lot of the plants were there when they moved in, and it was just editing, although they did transplant some things.
Daddy would bring things home. I mean, I do this because he would be carrying things out of the car in their earthen container with roots, you know, and he would plant. I think he brought plants home, and I think he just brought rocks from everywhere.
Oh,
because-
absolutely.
I remember one time Mama almost had a heart attack. He stopped the car because there was some really nice black and white granite, marble kind of stuff in Vermont, like the marble works stuff.
Mhm.
Granite.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he wanted a sample, and she didn't want the car to get hit on the side of the highway, but he was convinced that there was room between the driving lane and the rocks, that there really was a shoulder that he could pull off in, and we didn't get hit.
So there you go.
There you go. All's well that ends well, right?
Yeah.
What was Carlton's brother's name?
Alan or,
Eloise.
yeah,
Eloise. He's
Yes.
not still alive, is he?
no.
Oh, heavens, no. No, he died many years before Carlton. He was more of a driven personality.
Like Betty.
Carlton slowed down to accommodate his injured heart, and it basically regenerated.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with Carlton for like 8 years. I don't recall anything like that, you know, so.
No.
he-
No,
he-
no. By the time he was in his 80s and 90s, when he was here with me and we had home health nurses coming in every 2 weeks to do, you know, vital signs and check on him, his heart was beating just as regular and strong as it needed to. His blood pressure was 90 over 70, and he was on no medication at all, ever. You know, it didn't kill him, and so that was it. He just kept ticking. We used to joke about him being the ever ready bunny.
Yeah. We were wondering too, who was Uncle Paul?
Paul Mattis.
Friends.
Yeah, he was secretary of the Staten Island Historical Society. And I think he had a hand in the acquisition of the Finley House. I wouldn't be surprised if he found out about its vulnerability, the property where it was standing, its original site, as Felicity mentioned, was going to be demolished for a highway. So Uncle Paul would have been very mindful of that. Uncle Paul was also instrumental in saving the Alice Austin photographs, the glass negatives, and helping her get into a safe haven for her final days. Yeah.
His last name was Mattis, M-A-D.
Maddaus. He lived in Great Kills in a building, a house known as the Holy Spring House.
Or Egbert Buckaloo. It's a very, very old, was,
Yes.
of course was.
We have a beautiful picture, and on the site now, there's two family houses.
Friend is there.
Okay, did your parents ever tell you anything they learned about any of the previous owners of the house?
There was a very nice article about the house that was written by Mrs. Cullen in the Historian, I believe.
Yes, it was in the Staten Island Historian, a 2-part article. So we didn't have to do any homework about that. It was all right there for us. But I'm sure Carlton knew anyway, because some of the nature walks when he was, when Uncle Billy Davis was still alive, they would visit, the Bird and Nature Club would visit to see the unusual trees that Olmsted had planted. So my dad knew the place very well and absolutely valued it and loved it. And, you know, he knew the site and its significance. And I have to say, as I got more involved in Staten Island history, I was kind of amazed at the sequence of owners of the house and how they connected with every phase of the timeline of Staten Island. You know, Erastus Wyman and the railroad extending, and he gave it the name Woods of Arden House so that it would be a place that you would take the railroad from St. George, because you came across on the ferry, and then you would take the railroad, and at Eltingville Station you would get off and you would take a horse-drawn vehicle down to down the Woods of Arden Road, Amboy Road, Woods of Arden Road, and you would end up at the picturesque Woods of Arden Inn, and that's where you would have your picnic and sit on the porch, and you know, that was your day's excursion. And was it Dr. Anderson who was the quarantine officer who lived there?
He owned the property, but he never lived there. He was growing vegetables that for his patients, but I didn't know he was a quarantine doctor.
I'm pretty sure I found him in the quarantine records at the Staten Island Institute.
Cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. While your family was living there, did you ever come across any items from the previous owners or employees, old newspapers, letters, tools, utensils, anything like that?
Was there a plow in the barn?
There was
The tool sharpener,
Oh,
That you
the
sat on.
whetstone,
You
the
sat on
whetstone.
the road like a bicycle.
the grindstone?
Yeah, the grindstone. Yeah, that was from the barn.
Oh.
Yeah.
Daddy had a wall on the chimney where he had hung things like a Betty lamp and
Yeah.
a carpenter's wheel thing.
The surveyor's tool, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was trying to remember what else.
and a
I'm-
lamplighter thing.
Yes, and
The rush light.
Yeah.
I believe they came from the yard, and he found bits and pieces of a
A
China.
stirrup.
Oh, I don't
There
remember
was a-
that.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
It was a
that's right.
Stirrup.
Oh, I don't remember that.
What were you remembering? I'm sorry.
I forget.
A china
A China doll part or something, I think. A doll head? Ring a bell, Eloise?
with black hair,
That one, yeah.
and I found one of those china eggs that they put in nests
To encourage the chickens to get broody.
Yeah,
That's right.
before they could manipulate.
My attempt at Olmsted House archaeology was less than stellar. I went snooping around underneath the porch in the side room on the west side, and then went up under the porch floor itself as far as I could go. And oh, I found bones, how exciting. And I gathered as many as I could find and brought them to Carlton when he got home from work. And he said, "What did you do? Rob a butcher shop?" All kitchen midden, you know, it was all like, this was from pork chops and that was from something else. And there was nothing exciting about it. It was not archaeology.
It was exciting to me, and I don't even remember this.
But the location might mean that, never mind.
Well, maybe Wyman ate that pork chop.
Yeah, there you go, exactly.
Carlton received the Lennon Davis Award from the Staten Island Museum. Do you have any memories about him winning this award? Do you know what year it was, especially? It's easy to find that out, but you know, we're just.
Because you won't find out from me.
Did he mention receiving the award to any of you?
Lynn Davis. Crystal thing,
Yeah.
we were there.
Okay.
We were there.
Oh.
I'll show you the picture.
Later back.
I wonder if that was after I had moved to Vermont, because I don't remember going to an event, and I'm sure I would have, because I've been working at the Institute.
I think you were still, I have pictures.
Unless it was while I was in Cooperstown.
I didn't see the question. This must have come after.
This came after, yes,
I
yes.
looked at the computer.
Oh, when my computer was broken.
Today?
Yes.
Oh, gee.
I just got this question this morning or something.
Yesterday.
Well, whatever, it's okay.
I can send you something about that.
Okay, perfect. So this is something I was thinking about today was, what was a typical summer day in your youth when you were living at the house with Tina Kasman next door? You know, what activities were you involved with? What were you three girls doing when you were young on the Olmsted property?
I remember going and looking for clover for the rabbits.
Oh, yeah.
I remember climbing the climbing tree, walking around. I remember getting up in the morning, eating breakfast, coming out and making that noise we used to make. That one.
That one.
I don't know if I could do that again.
I do it every day.
Good for you.
What is it?
it's just a way of calling, and I tell you, I went to see the neighbor Jimmy in Virginia. He didn't even know I was coming, and I was down the end of the driveway that I knew it was his house, and I saw somebody up there, and I went, "What?" And he went, "What?" So it lives on. I use it to call my
Great.
husband, and all of us still use it.
I don't know where it came from,
No,
though. I
I
don't
don't
know
know.
who invented it. Daddy used to, or Mama too, blow on a seashell to, and Tina, you had a bell.
We have a bell.
And
Yeah.
what did the McCaleb's do? Did they have a different bell?
They had a.
They had a
no,
triangle, didn't they?
Did they?
Or did you?
Somebody had a triangle.
We had a bell with a clapper, like a school bell. In fact,
Yeah.
and, when we were selling the house, my nephew asked if he could have that bell to hang on his house. And I said, if you ring that bell, you're gonna get 3 little Casmans coming running all the time. And he has 3 little kids that come around. How about blackberries, girls?
Oh, we
Blackberry picking galore.
Yeah, strawberries.
And
And
strawberries.
strawberries. I always knew school was getting close to end because it was strawberries,
time.
and then it would be blackberries.
All
Oh,
in
but
summer.
you're skipping over the honeysuckle.
I was not a plant eater.
Oh, I was. I was in terror.
Guess I did a little mulberries,
Uh-huh.
which aren't all that delicious, but
No, they
They were
never
there.
got real purple.
they were there and we could pick them. Purple ones were
Well,
better
because
than the other
that's
ones.
because the big tree was a white mulberry, so they get a little pink, and that's the most they can do.
I have moving pictures, and someday we're gonna get them on tape, and we're gonna show them of us, after we cut the grass, putting it in wheelbarrows and putting it in a big pile, and everybody was jumping at it. All you
Oh,
girls.
I'll bet. Did we ever roll down the hill on the side of the house together?
In a cardboard box. I remember doing that in a cardboard box. I don't know.
Was that at McCaleb's or?
No, on the side of where the yew tree is now filling up all the space. That
Oh,
used
that's
to
where we
be.
used to sled too.
Yes, yes, yeah. We had fun. We had fun. I remember coming and looking at the fishes in the pond here. When they were up.
We played
There.
it at the dollhouse.
Yeah.
On our yard that
yes.
looked like this house, the Swiss Chalet, and
Yeah.
dressing up like Indians and sitting around a little fake campfire, and I have pictures of that.
Oh,
I'll
wow.
have to pull them out. Yeah,
Mm.
little feathered headdresses out of construction paper.
Oh,
Did your mom help us make them?
Well, Mom worked on the playground. She was a arts and crafts specialist, so she, yeah.
somebody. Oma?
Oma is what.
to get Eloise back.
Sorry, we lost you there for a minute.
Oh, she's-
Good. Okay, you got me back.
Maybe you can answer. Oh, let me hit record. It doesn't say, oh, it does say recording. Okay.
Okay, good. Ask Eloise.
So what did I miss?
I asked a couple of questions, but one thing, what is your full name and date of birth?
Eloise Mary Beil, February 3rd, 1951.
The other thing I asked was, where are Carlton's parents buried?
His father is in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, and his mother was buried in Potter's Field, wherever that is.
Hart Island?
Yeah,
Now, he must have died young, your paternal grandfather.
oh yes, Carlton was 6 years old, and Alan was 5.
And then they moved to Staten Island. They left Manhattan after that time, from what I understand.
They left Manhattan and they moved first to East Orange, New Jersey, where they lived for 1 year. And then in 1916, they moved to Staten Island.
Any idea what brought them to Staten Island?
What my dad said was that there was a German-speaking community in East Orange, and of course there was a German community on Staten Island as well. And I think that was whether his mother had connections among there, because his father was the one who was German and she was French, but we think she was from Alsace because she was equally fluent in French and German. And evidently she wanted to keep the connections with the German community.
Right. And from what I remember him saying is he grew up at Concord, and that there was a strong German-speaking community in that
Yes,
population.
area.
Community.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And the last question is, I didn't quite get your mother's maiden name, and I'd like to have the spelling of it too.
It was Abbott.
So Abbott.
Bees. and
Two
two
A?
Bees.
A-B-B-O-T-T.
Got it. Okay. Is there anything that you would like to add? Anything you'd like us to know about your parents or the house or growing up in the house or?
I was thinking about when you asked about favorite expressions, and my mother had very picturesque speech. Both of my parents were incredible storytellers and loved language and played with language. And so I can remember my mother saying, "A weed is just a wildflower growing where people don't want it." And she loved explaining to us the family history or the deeper history behind sayings. So might as well hang for a sheep as a lamb.
Yeah.
You know, that was one that was pretty self-explanatory. And an example of her writing and the way it would just flow out at the most unexpected times. When she made hard-boiled eggs, they would be put in the refrigerator, and she would put something, usually HB for hard-boiled, but sometimes it would get more elaborate than that. So one day I went down to get a hard-boiled egg to take with me for my lunch on a picnic, and here was an egg that was inscribed, "Few things in this world are perfect. A few sunsets, certain pieces of music, God, and the egg."
Oh, my. Wow.
And I really didn't want to break it up and eat it, but it wasn't going to keep. So, yeah.
Where you mentioned that your mother wrote quite a bit. Where are her writings? Do you know?
I have a few notebooks. Nothing was published.
Did she write about the house in any way that you recall from those notebooks?
She wrote a real estate ad for it, playing on Shakespeare.
No.
But she didn't write anything about the house, did she?
No, because Margaret Cullen had done that. It was, you know, all.
I don't mean the history of the house. I mean her
Oh,
living in
her
the house.
emotional
Your
response to living there.
Yeah.
Not that I can think of, but if I come across anything as I'm winnowing through papers, I'll let you know.
Good. Very good.
Yeah.
My favorite expression that my mother used to say is when she wanted us to do something, a chore that we were all gonna do, she would say, "Flax around, girls." And I got her intent because it would, you know, it was something
From
that
the
really
context.
done now.
Right.
But I didn't really get it until I went to work at Richmond Town and I learned how to process flax. That is not a metaphor. That is quite literal. When you're working with flax, there's a rhythm that you get into that is so satisfying and efficient, but you can never stop. It's like go, go, go. And the rhythm of it just pulls you along. It's just a little bit meditative and satisfying.
Gotcha.
And that's what she wanted us to do.
I have one other question about your mom. Didn't she come from a family that had authors in the family?
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Yes. Mhm.
Jacob Abbott, he writes biographies.
and the Rollo books.
Yep. And Jane Abbott, his daughter, I have several of her books for young women, young adult books.
Did she
And
share
John.
her books with your children and did you read them and discuss them, or?
We had a set of Jacob Abbott biographies of kings and queens of England, right?
Yep.
I remember
And-
reading them. Sorry?
And David Crockett.
Well, they were very fun. That's why I like English history. I'm
Yeah.
sure Jacob's fault.
Yeah. Beautiful little embossed red covers. The books were
Yeah.
5 inches tall and 4 inches wide, something like that. About a spine about 1/2 inch, embossed with gold. They were lovely.
Where are they? They're gone?
Do you know where they are? Do you have them?
No, I don't have them. Mama gave the Rollo books to Mark, I'm pretty sure.
Well, then they're in his room. They might as well
Yeah.
be in Alaska, but they're safe.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you have your hand up?
Did Carlton keep a journal or field notes of what he found on Staten Island?
Only insofar as it would be program notes, you know, notes to himself if he was preparing a program. There's a big file of scripts that he wrote for television shows. And, you know, if you follow that through the years, that's the closest there is to a journal.
Where is that?
In the study, no, in the dressing room, off the big bedroom.
You just
That's-
grab that up.
That's where I pointed it out to the Historic House Trust people that day, the last day that we were able to tour, because they didn't quite know the true horror of what was growing in the basement and the asbestos. So they were letting us roam, and then they stopped letting us. So on that last day, I pointed it out to them and that it was important material and it should be preserved. So now it's either in the study or in the
Still in the
dressing room.
Were these scripts used for actual television shows?
Mhm.
Because I know he was on a New York City Board of Education station for quite a while. Maybe was it that show, do you think? You don't know.
I don't know. I didn't really have time to look. They were moving us along.
Wouldn't it be great if we could get some of those recordings?
Oh,
That would be amazing.
Right. Does anybody else have anything to add or questions to ask?
You're speaking about his writing. I must have stashed away somewhere some poems that he wrote. He would write these little short things. And of course, there's the Ceremony of the Four Lights.
Well, we would love,
I'm sure I have I'm sure I have a copy of the Four Lights. And
The Four Lights,
You have the Four
Yes.
Lights? Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably knows what this is, which is more than I do.
So I have one last question. Like, I'm fascinated that you say all these people he would bring to the house, or the few people you mentioned today that were really, to me, fascinating to grow up and see these interesting guests. What other guests? And was it normal, once a week, once a month?
irregular, right?
Sunday afternoons after church, if he gave people a ride, sometimes we'd end up with a gathering in the kitchen that would go on from, 1:30 or 2 when we got home until dinner time. And yeah, it wasn't so much any formal kind of thing. It was more
When it happened.
when it happened. Yeah. Oh, you have to see these trees. You have to da da da. And people would come. Or teachers in the area would bring their groups of students. They would have appointments for that, or scout groups, or campfire groups, or whatever.
And someone should mention Clarence Overton's name.
Oh, my.
Yes.
He's such a historical figure.
Yes.
Or do you find him better if you Google him as Cleve? I almost was going to do that the other day, and the computer must have broken again.
he passed away a couple of months ago.
Oh no.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That much.
Oh.
On Facebook, like, that's where I get all my news, it seems like, about people. What was he friends with your father, or? Yeah.
Oh, with the whole family, yes, for years. Yep. Yep.
I have no specific shining memories to share as an example. That's why there's this big silence.
Okay.
I don't know. if
He
anyone
used to
else-
come over all the time though, and he and Daddy would talk, I don't know, art, clay, mechanic. They were both great talkers.
Yeah, philosophy.
Philosophy, yeah.
Yeah. But I can imagine some of those initial visits having to do with harvesting clay from different deposits around the island.
Yeah.
Vince was doing the pottery.
So I also, Ray Matarazzo was here. He was the one that asked the question a few minutes ago. But I'm sure he'd be interested, and I'm interested. Did your dad ever talk about William T. Davis? And
Uncle
Is it
Billy
Eloise?
Davis. Who is this William T. person? Uncle Billy Davis.
but he passed before you guys were born, didn't he?
45.
Yeah.
Yes,
but
yes.
the stories lingered on.
And would you girls refer to him as Uncle Willie, even though
Uncle
you've never
Billy
met him?
Davis.
Uncle Billy.
Only in
Because Daddy did.
But that's how, I wonder if he called him Uncle Willie in person.
Billy.
Not Willie with a W,
got it.
Billy.
Yeah.
I wonder where Carlton, did he just make that term up, or?
No, that was his
Okay.
nickname around museum.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
if it was woodcraft or
We had a whole
museum.
crop
It
of
was all the young people.
followed him, right? And I guess was there on.
Yes. And they called Charles Lang Father Lang.
Oh, yeah, I've
Yes.
seen that.
Father Lang and Uncle Billy.
Who do you think was a bigger mentor to your dad? Which of
Uncle
them?
Billy.
Oh, Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't remember
Absolutely.
talking
The
about
field naturalist who knew something about everything. Absolutely. Yeah. But I can remember my dad talking about as Father Lang got older and was becoming more fragile. When he had paperwork to sign, he had a mild tremor in his hand, and Carlton would put his hand over Charles Lang's hand just to steady it so that Charles Lang could sign the paperwork. Yeah.
Oh, just so that everybody remembers, the photograph of Wilson's turn.
Oh,
taken
yes, Howard
Howard
Cleves.
is in my dining room.
Oh, wonderful. Good. Yeah, because Howard Cleves was a good friend of my dad also from those days. And Howard, we would go down to Lemon Creek to look at the Purple Martin houses every year when Howard Cleves was cleaning them out for the spring and getting them all, ready for the next nesting group.
Yep.
We would go to Princess Bay to visit Howard Cleves at his home. And he and my dad would sometimes tag team on leading nature walks and bird walks and that kind of thing. Towards the end of Howard Cleves' life, when it was more difficult for him to remember commitments that he had made or keep track of scheduling things, every once in a while, Carlton would get a phone call. And it would be Howard Cleves checking in on that they were going to do such and such, and what nature walk was he supposed to show up for when. Just like get back on track with Carlton, and off they'd go.
Well, thank you to Felicity and Eloise and Carlotta for sharing so much of the valuable history of your family and its relationship to Staten Island. This is definitely wonderful that we'll have for the records, and I'm sure we'll share a copy with you, so thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Wonderful.
Come back to Staten Island soon, Eloise.
Not on your life, you don't.
No, she's still there.
If anything would get me back, it would be a reunion at the old homestead with our wonderful neighbors.
Well, hopefully in a few years, we'll actually be able to go into the house, but in the meantime, maybe we'll have Tina host something.
Yeah.
There you go.
We should do a Zoom without a recorder and an agenda.
Okay,
Just do a Zoom for fun.
that's a good idea.
Zoom reunion.
Let
Sure.
me see something. Like, I don't know how I would have, and I should have done this. I should have enabled
Yeah,
my
there's a way
video,
to
yeah.
file.
Hold on one second, here we go. Okay, so this is what I should have done right from the start.
Oh, there you are.
Hey.
Can I go like this and it's even better?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's what I should have done, but I'm not a professional, so it didn't dawn on me until now.
I know that it's possible to do that, but I have no idea how. So.
But at least we captured, but that's what I really should have done.
Well, no, it's good that it goes on.
So
Google.
next time we will, we'll do it.
Next.
We'll do an informal Zoom without such, but you guys did terrific.
Share.
So thank you. I'm gonna go around the room and say thank you to
Oh,
everyone.
perfect. Hello.
This is Pat, how are you?
Hi, Pat. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. And we'll say hello to Tina.
There she is.
Hi, Eloise.
Hi.
Miss you. Come back
Yeah.
here for a little visit sometime.
We'll have a little back
We have to
here.
see your face again.
Yeah, great. I actually have dreams where I visit your house.
You have what?
Actually have dreams where I'll wake up and I'll say, oh my heavens, I was at the Casman's house. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I'll be in my dream walking up the driveway to your house, and usually in through the back door.
Right?
Yeah, and then cutting across to our place. Yeah.
It's a nice trip to have, I'm sure. By the way, I'm Eileen. Hello.
Hi, Eileen. Thanks for making this happen.
Oh, well, it was actually Tina and Pat, and I just got involved last minute, but I think it's a great idea. And this is Paula, who was part of the
Hi, nice to
question.
meet you.
Paula.
And there's Ray.
So
And you know Ray, right?
Yeah. Hi, Ray. How are you?
Good. I retired from the museum 11 years now.
11 years ago?
Yeah, I worked with Ed Johnson in the science department.
Yeah. Oh, I remember. Sure.
And I helped Eileen put together the Matilda Weingarten biography.
Oh, yes.
That's right.
That's the last time I saw
Wonderful.
her at the book signing on Tilly's birthday.
Yes.
Wasn't Eloise there?
I don't
No, I
think,
wasn't there. No.
Last time I saw her was at her dad's thing at the Rainbow Nature
That's my
Center.
dad's
but I did
memorial.
I interviewed Eloise, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, we're gonna cut off now, but thank you. Sure.
Okay, well, thanks for,
Show Eloise the ducks.
Eloise, you're going to see the ducks now. I was thinking I could show you the porch too.
oh, look at the ducks. Oh,
Does it all come back?
yes, some things look familiar and some things not so much, because we were mostly outdoors messing around with one thing and another.
And there's
Yeah.
I don't know what these are, right? She's got a whole bunch. She's got a wreath here.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes. All right, well, I will let you go, but thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Like this.